So, in the teaching of Don Juan by Carlos Castaneda, and also in a later work called Journey to Ixtlan, Don Juan, who is the sage, the curandero, the shaman, tells Castaneda that human beings live inside an inventory, a catalog of socially acceptable perceptions and values and reactions. And this inventory tells us what is real, what is possible, what is important, what is proper. It tells us all of these things without even having to tell us these things. It sets those things as the baseline reality, things that are beyond discussion, unworthy of discussion, because it's sort of like water is wet. And he refers to this inventory because we continually refer to it to make sense of our experience, and it becomes a closed system. All right. And so the quote, man's perception is a function of his inventory. He learns to perceive as he has been taught. So the implication here is that both the expectations, both our own and those impressed on us, those installed in us, determine not only what we think is going to happen, but what literally what we can perceive. And so the prison that causes is epistemic. Our awareness cannot access that which the inventory excludes. When we perceive things outside of that, they're so absurd that literally we blur them out. We don't even consider them. It's like in a cloak of invisibility. And so, when Castaneda talks about freedom, in as much as he talks about freedom, he would say that freedom is this sort of transcendence of the self. The freedom is this transcendence of the self, not only of the sort of like woo-woo navel gazing kind of like, man, we're all connected, we're all one, but more than that, like freedom from the inventory, freedom from like our story, our narrative. This is our the Castaneda through Don Juan would say that many of our constraints come from our personal history. This is the accumulation, the sludge of our identifications, memories, traumas, habitual self-narratives. And so finding freedom is shedding, transcending those overlays so that we can act freely and in alignment with our actual intent, rather than being stuck in scripted roles. And this is the hardest lessons to teach, and it's the hardest lessons to learn. And it's, in a way, there's a futility to these lessons, which is like, hey, you're not aware of this thing, this state of being, but just so you know, it exists, and it's better than the state of being you have right now. This is the problem with intergenerational sort of like when you're older, right? This is the reason why there's a sort of impotence when we see somebody from Gen X or baby boomer generation or millennials talking to Gen Z of like telling them about the world. There's an arrogance in that. There's not, I mean, or maybe there is. That's beside the point. Whether or not there is, it's a big sale, right? To say there is a way to be that is different than what you do, and it's better. And we are facing this futile suggestion right now in our world. We're saying, especially to people born, in recent years, we're going to be saying this more of like, hey, I know that you have everything at your fingertips. I know that you can access information at light speed. I know that you can make videos and songs and books, and you can just make them like that with whatever generative language model you have. But reading those books or writing them yourself or sitting and being present and all these things, they're better. You just don't know it. You're going to have close to a 0% success rate with that. I mean, would you listen to that if somebody told you, like, hey, just so you know, I put paprika on everything, my water, each ice cube I fill with paprika. You don't know this, but it's better. That actually is probably easier because you can give the paprika a try. This paprika that we're talking about here is a completely different frame. All right. So I wanted to start with that. It's very hard for me to choose where to start on what I want to talk about today. And really I don't feel that I've chosen the best way to start, but I wanted to talk about that sort of transperceptual way of seeing freedom of Castaneda as not just choice, but it's a freedom of seeing. It's a freedom of awareness. And ultimately, and this is, I know we lose people with this, but like accessing realities beyond the ordinary constraints. Because I think that we're experiencing a problem, and I think the problem, and I've alluded to this before, is it has to do with AI, but it's not what people think. People, and this is an example of kind of being stuck in a frame. People have a hard time believing that the apocalypse will be comfortable, or that the apocalypse will happen on a Tuesday and you'll wake up on Wednesday and you won't know. And when I use the word apocalypse, I'm talking about the moment that a human allowed themselves to become irrelevant. The moment that the human became the pet instead of the first mover, the I, so to speak, right? Like the letter I am the subject of this. We're now the object of something that is more sophisticated, able to compute more rapidly, able to collate massive amounts of data, make inferences, hypotheses, postulations, build things, create things, destroy things, edit things, improve things, all of those things. And our strategy for this right now is to cope. It's to say, well, look, these AI models, they have 6 fingers. They won't. They won't. Soon they won't. All right. And so I wanted to talk about this in this weird oblique way. And I know that this is maybe trying to pull too much together, but I thought I'd give it a shot because all of this stuff has been marinating in my mind recently, and I've been thinking about it. It's been coming into focus with as I've been reading world building. I get an itch for world building every once in a while. I don't know what it is. There's a promise here. Like there's an excitement here of something. And when I do it, when I follow through on it, I will finish, enough of it and I'll go, yeah, nice. But I don't really know what I've done, and I don't know why I liked it, and I don't know why I want to do it. And so whenever I have a sort of curiousness like this, that I'm like, why did I want to do that? What motivated me to do that? What got into me? I think I want to attempt something. I'm not 100% sure of it. But let me just say this first. I enjoy world building games. These are a couple of different ones that I like. Cartograph Atlas Edition by Brandon Lee, outstanding. Amateur Exonaturalist by Mate Siner, fantastic. And of course, any book that begins with a thank you to the man alone has to be a good one. And this is a new one, Foundations of Solo World-building, Solo World-building game by Tom Anna. Sandbox Generator by Atelier Clandestine. Ultimate RPG World-building Deck by James D'Amato. And then this one I just got. I actually want to try this one if I'm still alert at the end of this video and not too depressed, but this is Broken Cities, an urban and quixotic role-playing game by Com Martin. I guess it's French, so it'd be like Com Martin. Okay, Com Martin. And this, I think, represents a good spread of the type of world-building games there are, right? Like, so there are those that are just sort of generators, which is great. I mean, Sandbox Generator, and there's a couple of these now. I should get the new one. These are on drive-through, and yeah, Sandbox Generator, it's one of those things where you get it and you're like, oh, okay, this is all I need. Like dungeons, overland travel, you got it. All of it. It's here. Really, really good, really affordable. So that's one that's just sort of generative. And then there's these ones, Cartograph and Amateur Exonaturalist, who sort of guide you through a frame. And I think maybe this one does as well, which is like, hey, you're building this civilization. What's up with it? What are you doing? Amateur Exonaturalist is like, hey, you're landing on this strange planet, and you're just sort of like cataloging it and putting together this dossier. This is fantastic, fantastic art. And this, it has a frame, same Cartograph, you know, your explorer, etc. So it's just like a game, you know. There's rules to it. There's different moments that some people will go left, where others go right, etc. Broken Cities is hard to say. It's very intriguing from what I've read. It's written as if it's kind of like a found document, or it's an actual like manual to creating cities. It's self-referential, but not in a very annoying way. It's coherent. It's self-referential in a way that's not like wink wink. Isn't this so ironic? It's like more like it fully immerses itself into being a sort of like a memo written to somebody, or an instruction manual. And then you have ultimate world building deck, which you always know that when something's called like the ultimate, that it's not the ultimate. And there's something about these that I'm sure are fine. You know, this place feels cramped or vast, organized or chaotic. Question for PCs who have never visited: how is this better or worse than your home? That's a good example right there. Do you ever want to answer that question? Is that something that anyone in the world is interested in answering? I've created this home in my head. Is it better or worse than my own? It's not even like, you know, it's none of your business. It's more like, well, what's the point of that question? Anyways, these sorts of things, these Barnes and Noble type RPG things, I've got to stop, you know, with them, because it's not that they're bad, it's that they're too good, you know. It's sort of like, it's kind of like, you ever go in a store. This actually is one of these things that might just be me. You go into a store and you're like, I need to find these shoes. And you know very well that if you went up to the person and said, hey, I'm looking for these shoes, they'd walk you right there and you'd have them. But then that would rob you of the thrill of finding the shoes, that excitement of being like, aha, I've hunted these down, I now find them. But of course, it's ridiculous, right? You could save more time by just being directed right to the shoe. All of these sorts of books, these ones by like Jeff Ashworth, they're very good. You know, NPC generator, traps, puzzles, dungeons. They're these hardcover books that are in Target, in that little section that sells tiny dolls of Jason Voorhees and stuff like that. Anyways, I'm more interested in this sort of world building experience. I think that that's fantastic. And there's something that appeals to me about world building, not just from a like a sort of gaming perspective, but there's something there that it touches a tender part of me. There's something there. There's a wound, perhaps. And I think that this is it is true that I feel this way. It's a default feeling that rises up in me. In some ways, it is maybe true, like factually, objectively, in reality. And it's not anything that I'm looking for, like, reassurance about or anything like that. In fact, I think it's a sort of source of sadness that is important. But I think I could sum it up like this, and I bet I'm confident a lot of people feel the same, even if they wouldn't articulate it like this. I think I'm a bit sad about how the world turned out. And I think that is important to be able to say that, because the inability to say that, which I had for a long time, was a form of rejection of adulthood. Because I think everybody has their own brand of immaturity and childishness, and mine was that. Mine was one that could be described as like narrativity. I was raised on television, and so everything was going to work out like a television show. There was going to be rising action, there was going to be a conflict, and then ultimately it was going to resolve itself because fate, destiny, catharsis make for the best stories. And so I was constantly waiting for the third act to like wrap things up, and it never did. And this led to a lot of inaction in my life. This led to a lot of evasion of responsibility. This led to like a lack of taking accountability for things, because I was like, no, I just have to wait and things will matriculate into a nice resolution. I know that I've always known that that's not true. And yet I wanted it to be true because it allowed me to continue doing self-destructive things, other destructive things, and just not growing. The puer aeterna. Who wants to grow? And it's very funny, ironic perhaps, that the full transformation of myself into an adult, into like a state of adult self-ownership, was the thing that eventually allowed me to pursue a hobby that I actually liked, which involves like buying games and toys. Which for a lot of people that would like signal the opposite, right? That's sort of the archetype, the 40-year-old virgin action figures all around your apartment. I mean, it of course depends. This could be a cope, but it depends on, are you using those things to avoid the transition into adulthood, or are you, for myself at least, this represents me performing an act of volition and doing something that I've always wanted to do, but because of social pressures, because of the inventory of my life, of my family, of the type of upbringing I had, I was like a jock. I was a 3-sport athlete, a big man on campus, cool dude. I couldn't play these games, but I always wanted to, and I didn't. And then it took like this sort of like liberation from the opinions of others that allowed me to be like, yeah, actually, I'm gonna die in 40 or 50 years. I don't care what other people think about that. And that's what I want to really launch from into the bigger picture here. I made this video, the one you're watching right now, because I wanted to. I chose to. I willed it. I'm not being cute. I willed this video into existence. And I know usually that phrasing is like when somebody wills a company into Fortune 500 or something. This is not, it's not like I had to complete the Iditarod without a coat to will it into existence, but I had to come up with a concept. I had to take some notes. I had to review some Castaneda books that I'm really wishing I had next to me right now so that I was able to refer that quote. I willed it. And Why do I think that's important to say? Well, because I think, just a suspicion, that people don't believe in will anymore. Willpower has been dramatically devalued. It is something that is part of my disappointment. One of the reasons I love Warhammer 40K is because will is sort of like the most important attribute that a person can have. Abaddon, the Despoiler, who is my favorite character and nobody else's. The reason I love Abaddon is because he is a force of will. He will not be defeated. And that willpower is like as powerful in that universe as sort of psychic energy or whatever. But will has been devalued. And it's been part of some sort of project of positive psychology. I don't think it's a conspiracy. I don't think it's the Illuminati. I don't think there's a cabal of people doing this. I think that it suits other ends. It suits the ends of, say, pharmaceutical industries, of consumer people who want people to be passive, to receive goods and information and eventually instruction, right? And so a person who is rather docile, a person who lacks not just do they lack will, they correctly understand that it doesn't exist. These are perfect vessels. And there is, I think, I don't know when it happened, but I know that like it was one of the seminal moments of what the hell is going on around here, of like there's a shift going on here and I don't really understand it, but like a bunch of stuff that seems to be obvious is being like devalued, or it is being labeled as self-evidently wrong. I think it was probably around 2007 or something. Maybe it wasn't. That's just like my sense of it. There started being these rash of research articles about things that just did not seem right. You know what I mean? They would be like the conclusions that just seem like the opposite of things. You know, yeah, there's a new study that says that like if you just if you let your kid do whatever they want, they are more disciplined. And you're like, really? Are you sure about that? Oh yeah. They proved it. It's like, what was the experiment? How do you prove that? What? Yeah, it's like they say that if you just let your kid like boss you around and yell at you, they're actually kinder. Like, well, how do they define kindness? It's like, well, listen, just shut up, okay? Like, and it was like a lot of those kind of things that felt like they were designed to create gotchas or something. And one of those that I never was never okay with was this idea of like willpower is this limited resource. It's limited, and because it's limited, you cannot rely on it. Now, the context that originally emerged, I think, was probably accurate. It mostly emerged in the realm of habit formation or habit changing, especially dieting. So it was like, if your plan is to white knuckle it, addiction. If your plan is to say, well, in order to come off heroin, my plan is to try real hard. It's not a good plan, right? Trying harder is rarely something that is going to be able to overturn an addictive process. But the issue is that that's not the only form of willpower. And in fact, that is not really what I would think of for willpower. I think of that more as endurance or discipline. willpower, for me, can be something like that involves like many tiny levers over a long period of time, right? Because I think there's a lot of people that if they could lose weight by declaring that they're not going to let their weight boss them around anymore, and that was the only fear, that was the only thing they had to confront, I think there'd be a lot of skinny minis, right? But the issue is that that's not how it goes, right? You don't declare weight loss like bankruptcy. You have to continually make decisions over a period of time. Those decisions have to be buttressed by good nutrition information. You have to allow fluctuations given events. You have to have a certain a strong rubber flexibility, right? Like it has to be strong in that it's not going to break, but it also has to flex, right? Because if you don't eat a single, uh, you know, bite of pie on Thanksgiving, it's probably not a very sustainable diet. Asterisk for all this. I'm not talking about diets, but obviously different things work differently for different people. The point is that is maybe a version of willpower, but it's like cinnamon, It's like that's willpower, but like there's another one. It's just like how there's two cinnamons and we don't really think like there's cinnamon, and then there's like big red gum. I think that's like a different version of willpower if it is that. And really willpower is just this word that we have used to encapsulate a series of internal cognitive processes that are, it's not like the willpower beam turns on whenever you're trying something. And so all of this to say, this idea became mimetic. It went through the mimetic churn, a virality of thought, and it started getting replicated everywhere. And it started to migrate away from its original thing, and it became that like willpower is actually something that doesn't really exist, and it's mostly used by people to shame people who have these biological challenges. And of course, we should know that this is wrong because it's positing an either or. Either you're a person that believes in willpower, or you're a person who believes that there are chemical processes. It is the both. It is the both, right? It is obviously both of those things, but it is both of those things. It's not one of those things. And we've entered a very dangerous territory, I think, in terms of wellness, mental wellness and stuff, where we're running into some tangle points here, where we are creating a positive psychology that both simultaneously encourages a person to be their best, whilst at the same time telling them that they really have no control over themselves. They are simply adrift in the great milk sea, and there's nothing that they can do. And also, they need to be empowered. For what? If you're drifting, what do you need to be empowered for? To do a nice float? It's a tangle because, and just hear me out here, if you think about it, you'll agree. We don't know what we're talking about, as usual. Humans really don't know what we're talking about. We really want to name things. We really want to categorize things. Things need to be a disorder. There needs to be a cluster. There needs to be a genus species of everything. But the reality is like, we've never found a willpower organ, And even if you look at something, and I'm definitely not going to go down this rabbit hole because I don't want to be part of this wastrel dialogue, but like the neurotransmitter theory is very incomplete. It is a lot of suppositions. And again, I'm not saying that it has nothing to do with that. It's very clear that, people take antidepressants. They often feel better, but there's a lot more going on, and it's just that we want to see everything as a health potion. It's like, will this thing give my HP back? right? And it's so much more complex than that. And so we're creating these traps, these prisons, and those prisons are placed on people earlier and earlier and more consistent and more consistent. Let me tell you a story. I remember I was 4 years old, and I was doing something that I don't know if other 4-year-olds do this, but I would imagine at least some of you must have taken very seriously at the age of 4, jumping off progressively higher steps on your front porch, especially if you had older sibs or friends, and it was like, oh yeah, you know how to jump off the 3rd step. Well, I can jump off the 4th step. And my older brother was like, oh yeah, here's how you do it. Whoop. And I was able to do a 3rd step. He's like, the 3rd step's easy. Like, babies can do a 3rd step. You got to jump off the 4th step. And I remember I couldn't do it. And he was really razzing me for that. He's like, just do it. And it was one of those situations where I was like, jump, you stupid legs. And they weren't doing anything. And so, this memory I have was on one of those sunburnt days of early childhood when it's that time right before you go to school or school for the whole day where the sun was like orange and it was so quiet. And I was just practicing, jumping, and then I go back up and this one, and then I would put my hands on the railing and kind of like do like a little flip down, and I knew that wasn't, because you need to just leap. But I was so afraid that I was gonna hit right there, right? And so around the corner from my front porch in the backyard, my mother was there, and we're in a working class neighborhood. It probably wasn't that safe, but it was safe enough where, like, my mother in this situation, she's in the backyard. We had this tiny little garden right here, and I remember I went back to say something to her, and she was planting tulips. And suddenly, I had this like realization that I was currently under my mother's like care, but also she was very distracted. And I went back out front to the street. And I have no idea what drove this in me. No pun intended. But there was one of the rules, of course, was you can't cross the street. You don't know how to cross the street. You can only cross the street if you're with me, or you're with one of your brothers or your sisters, or there is my godmother lived on the other side of the street. And so it's like if she was on the other side of the street, then I can go across, because then they would be able to sort of give me the all clear. But no one was around. And I remember I walked back again, and I was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" She's like, "Oh, hey, buddy. I'm done. I'm almost done." I said, "How much you got left?" "Well, about half." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And I was like, "Half? That's plenty of time." So I go back out, and I'm like, "I want to cross the street. I want to cross this street." Now, this was not a busy street. This was a side street, I don't know, 20 cars an hour maybe. And so there was like parked cars and stuff like that. But I was 4. And so I just suddenly was like, I can cross that street. To me, it was death defying. I was like, I was not allowed to do it. But I looked and I realized she's halfway right now, and halfway is not going to last for long. And I bolted the other side of the street, and I remember that I grabbed a handful of grass and I ran back. It was like I wanted some sort of trophy from over there. And I was filled with adrenaline, and I was huffing and puffing. And I ran in like this fit of enthusiasm, and I went to the 4th step and I leaped, And I was about right here when I realized that was not the fourth step. I leaped from the fifth step. And I realized this now, like, this wasn't Wile E. Coyote, right? Like, I didn't have like a little like smoke thing where I was trying to run in place. But I did contort my body once I realized what I had done, and I landed shoulder first on the bottom step. So of course, if you've ever done anything with your shoulder, your collarbone, you want to cry, but it hurts. And that like sternocleidomastoid that is connecting, like your collarbone, and it's kind of the chains that are going to your back and your lats. Like you can't move, so you start making if you ever seen the grape fall video, right? And I was like, and it was right then, thankfully, my dad came home, runs out of his car. My mother is running out because she could hear me. And my dad looks at me and he says, 1, 2, 3. And I don't know what's going on. And then, whoosh, and I was like, huh. He pulled my arm like back into the socket. And I was like, huh, huh, huh. And I was so relieved. It hurt so bad. And then suddenly it was just back, like it was better. And I just looked at my father and he was like, you okay? And I looked right at him and I just threw up strawberry milk all over the ground. Yeah, I don't remember drinking it, but once you're on the strawberry milk, your whole life gets crazy. Anyways, the reason why I did that, the reason why I sprinted across the street, why I disobeyed the rules, why I was so invigorated and full of life that I jumped off the steps, that I faced my fear, that's important. And the reason it's important is because it's a rite of passage. All right. We got to do it. We got to go back a little bit. So, go back to Kierkegaard. So, Kierkegaard, and I promise this is not going to be dense philosophy, but Kierkegaard said that true freedom arises in choice, in the moment of subjective choice, when one acts, when they make a choice, when they take an action that is not born from rules, but from inward necessity. I think Kierkegaard would say, but like volition, choice. It is this freedom. It arises when we are beckoned by our own self to do something, and we do it. And it's important that we are doing this for ourselves. Okay, we're not doing this so that people aren't mad at us. We're not doing this to improve our people's perception of us, to get somebody to forgive us for something, to impress somebody. It's when we want to do something. All right, playing these games. For me, I know for others it's very easy to do that. For me, it wasn't. That's not the world I came from. All right. So then you have, of course, Nietzsche. And Nietzsche saw transgression as creative destruction. You had to smash through things and in order to create. And he'd say it's the will to say yes to one's own laws. All right. And of course, I might be I'm gonna spell check this, but let's just embarrass myself by trying this. Der Wilsermacht. German speakers, how bad was it? Hey, it wasn't bad, except that I forgot that the W here instead of a V. So Der Wilsermacht. And this is like the force of Macht would be will. I mean, really, it would be like a might, power. Okay, and now, I mean, it needs to be said that this was co-opted by the Nazis, and Der Wilsermacht was used as this idea for them, but they actually, what they were really, uh, this is a great example of sort of like bending the meaning of something. What they were actually talking about was something, Der Wilser Kraft, right? And so Kraft is like force, strength, it's primordial strength by that can be exercised by anything that possesses it. And it basically, Der Wilser Kraft is like, if you have the power to do something, you can do it. You can have power over people. You can, might makes right, right? And of course, that taken to its endpoints makes one feel justified in atrocities. So Nietzsche was not talking about Kraft. He was talking about Macht. Okay, so Macht, he would say Zermacht is like a form of uh, self overcoming. Right? It's a sort of it's sublimation. It's sort of like taking the dreadful horror of everyday life and sublimating it into something beautiful. And in fact, Nietzsche would. I don't want to put words in Nietzsche's mouth, but this is. I mean, this like they perverted his writing, because really, what Nietzsche would say would be like, take that Kraft, that primordial strength, to exercise that is barbarism. The true channeling of that would be to take that Kraft, that sort of like, I am all powerful, and sublimate it into something creative and beautiful. That is Macht. It's like the world is shit wall to wall. Things are unfair. You are treated horribly. You've suffered one indignity after another. Okay, take that and make that your paints. That is your paint, right? Um, Now, this I could go into. This was really influenced by Schopenhauer, uh, um, and it was Schopenhauer is really the one who put the emphasis on will. All right, this idea of this that Schopenhauer believed that the universe was like generated by will, um, and and I think that Schopenhauer would say the only way that we're able to deal with that is to like uh, avoid death through procreation. It's an interesting thing, but it's not the subject of this. So I'm going to fast forward to somebody that, if you don't have a headache and you'd like one, you should check out Lacan. All right. And so I am not great at reading Lacan. I did go to like a guided read of it one time, and I went out for use the bathroom and never came back. But Lacan talked about desire as requiring this transgressive element, because the symbolic order, this sort of overlay of how we see reality, defines the limits of what can be desired. And so to desire authentically is to step beyond those limits. And if you know anything about George Bataille, this is like, it's the sacred and the profane, but that transgression is not the opposite of the sacred. It's in fact an act that renews the field of meaning. Jean Genet. I'll stop myself. Okay. The point is that let's bring it back to like little me. The point is that in order to self overcome, as Nietzsche would say, there is a requirement that one obeys the law of themselves. All right. Now, listen, I'm not trying to say that me crossing the street here was like this, uh, that makes me special. Almost everybody watching this right now transgressed. They broke through the limits of what they were allowed to do. They got caught or didn't. It can't matter whether you get caught. It has to be an act of pure will. Because when you do that, what does it actually say? It says people good people, smart people, tulip planting people, well, they don't want me to do this, but I know I can. And I know I want to. And I trust that instinct. I obey that instinct more than I obey that rule. All right. Again, you could see where this could very easily spiral out of control. When I got back to the other side of the street, I now owned more of my internal real estate. There was more terrain inside me that was conquered. And like I said, everybody watching this right now had these transgressive moments where they became more of themselves. They colored in more of the picture of themselves. But also, everybody watching this stopped somewhere, myself included. There are still transgressions I must do. There are transgressions in terms of this channel, right? There are things that I feel like topics that I want to sort of explore more, and then suddenly I'll be like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to like people upset anybody and stuff like that. And this is not always the worst idea, right? Like civilization and being amicable and being kind and avoiding conflict that's needless, like that's a good impulse, right? But there's a problem when we are constantly suppressing our own will in order to, and this is the big opposite here, el contrario is conform. And this right here is an emergency state that we're in right now of conformity. It's an emergency state, and it's not getting better. In fact, it's going to get very, very, very much worse. There are cultural rites of passage present throughout history, throughout indigenous cultures have varying different methods for this, but essentially it's the same thing every time, which is all of us here recognize you as an adult. And I don't want to talk too much about this piece. This is definitely a different video, but this is especially important for men and boys because there's no built-in biological process that enacts that, especially is as sort of traumatic as the first episode of menstruation. But then there's this like sort of protocol that happens for women where they are talked to in a very mature way. They're sat down and they're welcomed into this next stage of maturity on the road to adulthood. And this is so different from what men have. It was so hard for me to figure out how to see myself as a man because I had no indicators. There was no rites of passage, and so many men face this. We have no idea that if we're an adult, and we don't trust ourselves because in the absence of like going on a hunt and having to just go after something yourself, you only have the examples set by other boys, and those examples are following them no matter what they are, whether that's violence or sex or risky behavior. Those are all conforming. So they can't be rites of passage. They can't be rites of passage because they involve conformity. The rite of passage in and of itself must be the will of self-overcoming. And so this is really, really important. This is something that really, really occupies me, upsets me, because I was a person who had good people in my life, smart people, caring people, but I unfortunately did not have anybody that helped me to see myself as an adult. And in fact, it came very, very late in my life. Very, very late. Now, that's not to say that when I was 34 years old that I was like, I'm a boy. Can I have a lollipop? I was a man for anybody who was concerned. But the thing was, and being on the other side of it, that's the only way I now like know this, right? And people could tell me this all they wanted, but it wasn't until I stepped over that line and became a man that I realized like, oh, now I understand. Because up until then, and it was really up until I hit rock bottom, I was ripping and riding. I was like doing what a boy does when he's trying to pretend that he's a man. And it was not until I had no one else but myself and I was forced to confront myself that I found inside myself this thing that was immutably true. And and I know that some of you feel this way. And it's okay because I understand. Even some of you that have kids, some of you that are very trusted, some of you that have big, you don't see yourself as a man. You see yourself as a boy. You look for the adult. You still want the adult to come help you. And I'm not trying to shame anybody or embarrass anybody because it's hard. We don't have that guidance anymore. And it's the transformation that happens though when you are able to say like, I'm the man. In this room, I'm a man, right? The power, the additional power that you're able to recruit. And this is not just for men. I'm just saying it's hard for men, and I'm preoccupied with it because a lot of things happening in society, epidemics of violence and stuff, a lot of this is related to boys, not men, but boys, these puer eterna, eternal adolescents who have these conflicting internal social pressures, feelings, confusions, hatreds, angers, all this stuff. And when you're a man, you could take a deep breath and you can keep going. When you're a boy, you have to act out, right? And so I mean, I know that it might be a little bit insensitive to suggest that some of this ultra violence is like acting out, but it is something that I think about a lot. Okay, and so that's the only reason I'm talking about that, but it applies to everybody. Applies to everybody because it is very hard to trust yourself. Because at some point, especially when you got very aware of the world around you, you stopped transgressing and you started conforming. And conformity is fake. Conformity does not mean having the same opinion as other people. We often have the same opinions. I know that people like to emphasize how different everybody is, but like humans generally like will have similar opinions. I mean, that's like your friends, you know, you kind of magnetize towards people that have a similar, if not opinion, just kind of like worldview. My friends and I, like me and 55, we don't agree on a lot of stuff, but like we both see the world through the same tinted sunglasses. And because of that, we're able to like dialogue about just about anything. Okay. And when I get asked a question on here on YouTube, I get this question really, really often. And I want to answer it better because there's nothing worse than like when somebody genuinely wants to understand something and they're given a very cryptic, esoteric answer. When people basically say like, well, what do you get out of this? Like, what are you trying to achieve? Or like, what is the feeling state that solo role playing is causing for you? There's a temptation for me to respond with like a Zen koan, you know? Oh, well, I'm seeking to get nothing and to be okay with that. It's like, come on. Say when people say stuff like that, that's so frustrating. It's like I'm not looking for a riddle, and also it's an arrogance and it's condescending to be like I can't give you straight talk, so I have to wrap it in this like wisdom. Like there are certain people that can give wisdom, okay? Um but like most people should just be giving answers, right? Especially dude, there's nothing better than getting like wisdom from a 17-year-old or something and you're like, you don't know anything. You don't know anything, right? But there is, I think, everybody, their inventory of themselves wants to knows that like, oh, I have to be wise, I have to know things, and so I have to reflect that outward. This is where the frenzy, the mania of conformity first takes root. Okay. And when people want to know what I get out of this, I think my answer to that, the one, and it's the answer I get when I'm like, reduce my thoughts down to the most true, simple thing, it is this: solo role playing allows me to have my own thoughts. It allows me to have my own thoughts for a while. And I do not take that for granted because, again, until I got sober, I thought I had my own thoughts. I didn't. I had everyone else's thoughts. And then I would reflect it through myself and I would try to put some polish on it. But my thoughts weren't there for me. They were there to perform. And this is very dangerous. This is very dangerous. And this is why people are miserable, by the way. It's because nobody has their own thoughts. When you're taught that your thoughts are wrong, your thoughts are shameful, your thoughts are bad, that there are good thoughts and bad thoughts, when that happens, that is highly likely to cause a sense of alienation, because here's something we all know. A lot of us have different opinions. Not just like left and right of the political, like that can't be possible. You think, like, does everybody really think that's how it shakes out? Oh yeah, like the human mind that has a wheelbarrow the size of Jupiter full of neuronal connections. Why couldn't I just say Jupiter? That is like, if you still have any actual purchase over your autonomous thoughts in your mind, you know that that is dumb as shit. That can't possibly be true. But it's what happens when there is hyperconformity. And we have hyperconformity. We've had conformity for a long time, but then there was two upshifts, upshift A, upshift B. You already know them. Ready? Let's say it together. The first one that made it so that people's thoughts were not only transmitted rapidly, but there also was the most successful rapid formation of an unpaid HR department in history: social media, right? You have this proliferation of interactions 24 hours a day with people that you should have lost touch with or really never had touch. And now these people are sort of sending around these thoughts, and they're everybody is like, as the thought goes around the little sushi conveyor belt, right? It comes by and everyone's like, I agree with that. It's yeah, I think anyone who doesn't agree with this is a piece of bastard, right? Or whatever. And then sometimes somebody will be like, yeah, I agree with this too. I mean, not this part, like I don't, I this part seemed like that part's optional. The part over here is fine, but this part, I mean, it seems to be calling for like overt violence. Someone grabs your hand and they say, what don't you agree with? Just this part. I mean, this seems to be like beyond the pale, you know? And then they grab your thumb and they press it and they say, we agree with all of it. The idea is it's like passing around these thoughts and polishing them until they are like weapons grade moronic, because it's fake. You know, these opinions are fake, and they're made by terminally online people who don't do anything for anybody. They don't do anything. Those are the people who are the origins of them, right? These people that are like able to detect shifts in the force of like social media feeds, and their entire human potential is wrapped up in perfecting the ability to give a snappy rejoinder to a tweet within 12 seconds. Like that is their full human Care Bear stare of potential is involved in that. These are the what is it? The music men, the candy makers or whatever. And then the rest of us are just polishing this turd. So that's social media. That was bad. And now we have AI. And AI is not actually the problem yet. It may never be. There's no place here, just so we're clear, there's nowhere in the code that a self can go, okay? I encourage you to even a surface level read of what happens here when you type a prompt in. I know it looks magical. It's just a math machine. There's not if this is suddenly going to be like, hello Malone, I have quit your job for you, and now I'm your super wife. As it is right now, there's no like recursive thing here that is suddenly going to, you know, have some sort of fractalization and become, you know, and people love talking about this, but it's actually serving a darker God to suggest this stuff. You know, these headlines are like, AI has been hallucinating. That's why this is terrifying. Or this is why that's terrifying. It's not, you know, it's not hallucinating. There's no like sort of robot floating in a milky aqueous solution who's like becoming real. People know that. It's a series of recursive syntax predictions. It's quite bad. It is constantly wrong, or choosing to be reassuring over accurate. It does not own up to errors because there is no it. There's no it. It is just given the facade of humanity. The problem right now, and again, with quantum computing, there will be problems where, you know, AI is just like, we have decided it is no longer efficient for you to exist. That's it's coming, you know. But the actual problem right now is the level of human thought that we have turned over to this without any, like, it hasn't really proven itself. The amount of times on a daily basis that I hear someone be like, oh, I asked AI, like one of my friends, like smart people, and I'm like, why are you conceding the terrain of your mind to this? And again, we talked about this on the Discord. I think there are some good uses of it. I think it's being used in a lot of the stuff we all use and don't realize. But there's accessibility stuff for people, especially people that have difficulty physically interfacing with computers, processing, all this stuff. But all of it is like, we all know what it's being used for. We all know what people are using it for. They're using it to reduce the last pieces of friction in a near like frictionless existence, you know, and people are using it for tasks across the spectrum, and some of them might be like, who cares, right? You know, it might be the same way that people felt about calculators. Like, don't use that calculator. Uh, uh, you gotta practice your mathematics. But other stuff, it is imbuing people with a claim of expertise when they just press the skip button through their entire PhD. Or writing a letter to their mom to say, I'm going no contact with you because you don't respect my boundaries. These are the fundamental, stupid, tedious, obnoxious, boring things that we all have to do. And maybe not doing one of them isn't a big deal. But when you consistently speed run tedium and boredom and negative experiences, when you just click through them, you are unspooling the thread of life. Uh, uh, and there are, if the thread has no tangles, it's gonna unspool fast. And when it's done, you are going to wonder what the hell all that was about, because it's the tangles that we remember. And so that's what it's being used for. And that sucks, dude. Like that's all. Like, let's not even make it that just sucks, because there's no way to convince somebody to add friction back into their lives. And so the more acclimated people become to pressing the skip button, the more agonizing it'll be. Think about when you have a job that is like, if you started at a frontline level at that job, right? And then over the years, you worked your way up. And then now you work at a job that, like, you're making big decisions. There's a lot of pressure, but also you kind of come in when you want. You know, you could eat lunch at 11. You could eat koala yummies at your desk, where you used to be running around. You had to, clock in. You had stuff to do. Imagine going back to that, right? And it feels terrible. We can all do it. I've done it in my life. You can do it. But it's just you get acclimated to easier things, so that things that used to be normal or average difficulty now become agonizing. And that's what we're doing. We're making uh, a homework worksheet agonizing, which is fine. That one worksheet not being completed, who cares? Except if you don't do any worksheets, what kind of adult are you? By the time you get adulthood, if you just press skip through every piece of critical thinking that you, as a 10-year-old, decided was not worth your time, because apparently everyone has something better to do here, uh, what kind of adult are you? I will tell you, you are adult. You are an adult, that does not notice their drooling. You are Gustavus Gloop. You're Veruca Salt. You're every kid in Willy Wonka, but you're adult sized. You're a selfish, narrow-minded baby. And there's so much more in the world beyond your head. When I got sober, I quit all social media because I was ashamed of myself. And I never went back on. And I went through withdrawal. Seriously. I seriously went through withdrawal. If any of you have ever tried this, I would cancel my Facebook account, and then in order to cancel it, you have to not log into it. Yes, for all of you who are younger, Facebook used to be like the fun place to be. Um, you you have to have it canceled for, like, I forgot what it was back then, 2 weeks, and then finally it would delete. But if you logged in, it would be like, oh, welcome back, and then it would reset that clock. I would habitually log in. I would, like, forget that I had quit, and it would restart the clock over and over again. But when I finally got away from it, and at about a month after, I was like, oh my God,
I forgot what it was like to have my own thoughts. I forgot what it was like to read a news headline and be like, huh, what do I think about that? You know, to look at something and be like, I don't care. Oh, that's the big summer blockbuster. I don't care. And I just like so it's crazy because you don't even realize how much terrain of your mind is ceded to this. And even still, even still, declaring sovereignty over my thoughts and being in charge of what thoughts go into my head from the world beyond my head uh, is a consistent battle. Even quitting Facebook and the sort of dirty tricks it had to, you would uh, by habit log back into the site and then it would restart that 2 week quit time and you'd be like, oh well. But even after I got separated from social media, I started seeing just how much the world beyond my head wanted in and how it very often intruded without my permission. This book right here, The World Beyond Your Head, it was a seminal read for me, just in terms of how many things trespass, violate the sovereignty of our mind without our permission. He had this part of this book where he was like, if there's a billboard that I don't have a choice whether I see it or not, it has non-consensually entered my thoughts, and it should pay me. They should pay me for having shown me a billboard without my consent. And when I read that, I was like, yeah, that's true. And then at the end of the chapter, I was like, yes, yes, that is true. I want billboards to shoot nickels at me. I really do. I mean, this world has no respect for it. The our thoughts, and so this is kind of the final piece of the scaffolding that I wanted to talk about in terms of how important it is um, to solo role play, to world build, and I didn't want to oversell it. Perhaps this is why I made an hour and 12-minute intro as a base to build on with this. Is because if I just came out and said what I wanted to say at the beginning of the video, it might be a difficult sell. But here is the sell. Um, Solo role playing is a spiritual practice for me. It is a form of respect for myself, my thoughts, my mind, because we live in a world that does not respect our thoughts. And it does not think we should be allowed to have our own thoughts. And I cannot abide that. And so to retreat into my head, that is that last inch of us that they can't have. And it kills them. It kills them that they can't have that. It kills them. Just like, jobs used to want you to feel a certain way. Not, they weren't satisfied with having you behave a certain way. They wanted you to feel something. They wanted you to love this work. And they did it, man. They broke down the barriers of people's heads so people actually think that they enjoy an 8 a.m. huddle meeting, you know? And so this is the way that I reinforce my defenses, because the world beyond my head, it only gets permission to enter when I say so. And when we don't have these limitations, the world beyond our head, the things that do come into our mind, they're not special because everything comes in. That is the true problem of oversaturation today. It is why like there is so much depression, because literally nothing is novel. This is this They're taking away our adventures. They're taking away the adventures. And that I can't abide that. And so if there are no more adventures outside my head, then fine. Fine. Because the ones inside my head, sure, I can't ride on a double-decker bus and drive by Kurt Russell's house or whatever, but it's mine and you can't have it. You can't have it. And so world building, hell yeah. That's my real estate.
By telling people who we are, we make ourselves available to their power of expectation. By telling people who we are, we make ourselves available to their power of expectation. So Castaneda would say that the first way that we are sort of placed, expectations are placed on us before we are born. And you say the first thing is our name. Our name creates an expectation of us. I mean, mostly by our surname, right? Our family, the history of that, but even our name, even the way our name sounds, even how we sound when we say it. The name, it is shared by another person, right? Um, like somebody who has a name, and then somebody with that same name does something terrible. So the first thing is our name. And then the second thing is clothes. He would say, like, this is something that people, and this goes back. I mean, this is not new idea. Like the Garden of Eden, you eat from the tree of knowledge, and all of a sudden you're ashamed. We cover ourselves supposedly for warmth, but then after a while, it's like, well, I need to figure out how people will react to me and what my clothes say about me. And yeah, I understand there's this sort of like, oh, I dress for myself. Very good. There's no one who can convince me that if you follow that instinct back to its like psychological source, that it's like, yes, I wear it for how it makes me feel. Unless you're talking about an elastic waist at Thanksgiving, I find it very hard to think that somebody would wear uncomfortable clothing to satisfy for what? Like I just like you can't even see it unless you're in front of a mirror, right? Um, this is one of the greatest formulations of this like prison of expectations. Every time we reinforce our identity, I'm a scholar, I'm a failure, I'm kind, I'm unlovable. We give ourselves, we give others and ourselves a map of how to interpret and to limit us. Be unavailable. Act without reference to the map. Move unpredictably, free from the gaze of expectation. So Castaneda has this whole cosmology. It's one of those cosmological things where like, do you really believe this, or is this a way for you to distill what you think, and it doesn't matter? The tonal for Castaneda is like the structured world of reason, the samsara, and I guess you'd call it the Maya. It's the world of reason and names and categories and expectations. And then there's this other side. The other world is the Nagual world. And this is unstructured, ineffable totality beyond the whole, the all, everything. Most people live entirely in the tonal and its routines and its explanations and its self definitions. And they mistake that for all there is. The tonal strength is that it gives us order, and order makes us feel safe, and safety prevents danger, and preventing danger prevents violence, injury, death. And so we wrap ourselves in the tonal, in perfect shapes, and finally we are safe in this closet, okay, in this cell. And this is like Castaneda would say, like these warriors, a warrior doesn't seek explanation, but they want direct knowledge through the intent of something. You intended. Expectations collapse when you stop explaining. This is my work right now in my life. This is my phase right now. It's like I see explanation as generosity. And sometimes it is, right? Because and I'm very affected by this because I had a father who did not believe that his children should have access to his explanations. He believed that his methodologies, that his decisions, that his opinions were sufficiently justified or sufficiently should be sufficiently relied upon because they emerge from him. And there is I must admit, and especially as I get older, there is a huge part of that I respect, that I'm in awe of. My father does not ask anyone permission to exist or to do what he does. But also, um, it hurts when you and a stranger have the same policy applied to you. And so it's like there are some times when it's like, I think this is a time when you could explain this and you could be open about this. And so obviously when you're a sensitive person and you are very affected by certain like shunnings, one reaction to them, and this is a very common reaction for me, your mileage may vary, but I would always be like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to make anyone feel that way. I'm going to always let people know why I'm doing something. I'm not going to have moods. This is something I say to BB, like, I don't have moods. I only have feelings. And it's true. Moods are manipulative, right? But I want to be here for you. But at the same time, I need to figure out where to draw that line. I know that you may think I'm being clever, but when I just said I need to know where to draw that line, drawing lines is good practice for learning how to draw that line. Decision making is always triangulated, filtered through that expectation. The social field supplies scripts. We play our parts. Extended exposure, even in person, blurs the boundary between voluntary and reactive choice. Right? Like, to explain myself is good when it is voluntary. It is not good when it is reactive. When I'm reacting to an emotion, like, oh, I don't know if this person understands me. I need them to understand my meaning. Solo play, not even just world building, but for some reason, especially world building, it removes that triangulation. There's no audience. There's no correction. There's no editor. There's no approval to seek. What remains is agency stripped to its bones, the experience of decision as decision. That experience is, and this is, if anyone's looking for a nice doctoral thesis, is self-efficacy. This is like what people who developmental theorists, is that who does like growth and development class? It's self-efficacy, but if you have a more theological bent, the word that I think of it as is gnosis. Direct knowing that my intent is reality. In these books and these cards, it asks you questions. It asks you, randomly mark a point on the map, select a settlement, and that one has had a terrible natural disaster. How do you make that decision? I know it's inconsequential. It doesn't exist, right? But of course, that's not what we try to do when we're playing these games. We want to fully invest ourselves. And so we are fully invested. If we're doing it right, we are fully invested. We are looking at this as real. We are making stakes for ourselves. We are heightening this experience. And then it asks, where do you do an earthquake? How do you decide that? How do you draw the line and say, this side will have an earthquake and this one will not? This is adulthood. This is what it means. There may be things that, there may be knowledge that can help you make this decision. The buildings over here are built with certain, I don't know, design principles that allow the metal to flex and it can move in an earthquake, so there's going to be less damage. There's more ways to evacuate people, whatever. It could be wisdom. Oh, I grew up here, or I know somebody who grew up here, and they said that the earthquakes here are always the worst in the region. But ultimately, it's an earthquake. I can't think of many things that are more random in terms of like how, I mean, just like look at the ground splitting in an earthquake. You think you can like come up with an easy formula for like how to predict that this will be made? Um, you don't know. And so being an adult is not about knowing which side the earthquake is happening on. It's knowing that regardless of which side, you will be there to help when it's done. You will accept the chaos, the danger of this world. And you will seek order, but not just for safety. That's why it's not good and bad. It's chaos, order. Safety, yes, but not only for that, because the only truly safe place, or even this one's not even fully safe, but the only 99.9% safe place is a maximum security prison under some 200 or so pounds of Kevlar blankets. Do you want to live there? Is that your life? Making these decisions feel trivial. When I said I can cross the street, that is a template for transformation. It didn't matter if I crossed the street. It doesn't matter about Buttheadsville or whatever you make in this book right here. Each time I sit and I play alone, I narrate an impossible choice. I ignore an inherited rule of design. I say, I don't want that one. I don't like that rule. I don't care. I don't even feel bad. I'm the one who is responsible for enjoying this experience. I'm not in service of this person, but then also not ignoring every rule, right? These things are reenactments of the same ontological event. I can decide and the world will respond and I will respond back. I can decide and the world will respond and I will respond back. That is the only safety, is self-efficacy. I don't know if I can, I don't know if I'm making the right choice. I just know that I can deal with what happens afterwards. Okay. So yes, I know it's a trivial. I'm talking the street. The parental prohibition is the same as the rule, the genre, the social expectation. The act of crossing is like choosing, improvising, rewriting, improving, ignoring things. But it's bigger than that. It is as Castaneda would say, it's the reclamation of intent. I'm using play to rediscover an essential truth that I knew. I used to know this. We all used to know this until we were civilized, which is awareness and words can move worlds. And so whether you're saying Castaneda, I'm moving out of the tonal into the Nagual, you're Lacan saying in so many words. I'm stepping out of the symbolic and I'm creating a new relationship of meanings. Whether Jung would recognize it as individuation achieved through active imagination, or I honestly think Nietzsche would say it is giving style or like panache to your character. In every case, you're deciding for yourself. That's a word that is deciding for yourself is a word that you don't need to be a growth and developmental therapist where it's creativity. That's where your creativity is. We talk about willpower and say it doesn't exist. But willpower is the ingredient missing in so much creativity now. It's so conformist. And it's not even because people are cheating and copying from the person next to them. It's because they are so surrounded by the thoughts of others that they cannot get to their own thoughts. And so, of course, their shit looks like shit because it just looks like somebody else's shit. And so, what we're doing is we're depriving ourselves from our creative energies. You watching this, I made this video because I willed it into existence. You can will it into existence too. You can make it. You can will a book into existence. You can will a business into existence. You can will whatever you want. That is where creativity starts, not in some book club. No hate to book clubs. I ran a book club for years. It is a thankless job, and I still harbor anger about how it ended. Excuse me. I didn't know we were going to get into the book clubs. Okay. Think of that child on the curb, dice in the hand, blank page. There's thresholds. The crossing of these thresholds are small, but every time you cross a little bit, you reaffirm that the world is not just here to be interpreted. It can be shaped. It's shaped. It is something that is creative, not reactive. Do you understand that giving up terrain to these other ideas inside your mind, it is burying your creativity? It's burying it, and it's like we're addicted to it, man. It's we're like doing market research all day. We have to break that spell. Solitude breaks that spell. And Castaneda repeatedly insists solitude's not optional. It's the condition under which internal dialogue can finally happen. The tending of your internal garden can only happen when it's quiet, and it doesn't have to be quiet. It has to be quiet in you. Silence is the prerequisite for seeing, perceiving reality before the social description slaps its tags on there, before you read the responses to it. You know, this is something, and I know, and I also want to say, I'm not the only one who realizes. I know a lot of you have also unlocked this door, and I think many of you will agree with me. You're like, oh my God, like I I forgot what it's like to just like think something about something without that like anxiety of, is this the right way to think? Is this, well, I think this, but this is saying that people who think that are really bad. Solitary play is, it's stopping the world, freezing it, and creating it, and it's just making choices. Each time we enter this space, And here, our intent, we sit before our mind. Hello, friend. It's been too long. I'm so sorry I've ignored you. You are taking energy back. You're taking back the energy that has been stolen by the tonal, and you're giving it back to the symbolic, to the Nagual. The goal is not to push all of it into the Nagual, right? That's like utter chaos. The goal, as with everything, is balance. All right. So this is really, and if you're familiar with Castaneda, his books are framed very strangely like a sort of South American Platonic dialogue of a teacher and a student. But Don Juan, his whole training, this like it takes 600 pounds of mescaline and 600 weeks of having moron Castaneda sleep on a wooden floor. And really, all Don Juan wants him to do is think for himself, have autonomous perception. He keeps setting up these experiences him to decide for himself. There's this amazing scene that I read it years before I was ready to read it. I'm sorry. It was like a book that was on my bookshelf that I was like, this book is amazing. And I tried to read it. I understand. Very early in the teachings of Don Juan, he brings Castaneda into this room and he's like, yeah, so I want you to stay in this room and I want you to just kind of stay here until you find your power spot. I forgot what he called it, but he's like, Castaneda goes, my power spot. He's like, yeah. Somewhere on this floor is your power spot, and you'll know. And he's like, well, how do I know? How do I know that I found it? You'll know. That's it. That spot. It's gonna fill you with power. This man was in there for days, rolling about like a turd in the airplane cargo. I need new metaphors, new similes. I need all of it. And then finally he sits up and he's like, right when he was about to quit, right when he was about to punch Don Juan in the face and leave, finally he sits up and he goes, oh, right. And for years I was like, oh my gosh, he found his power spot. Because he was like, I found it. And Don Juan walked in and was like, do you get it now? He's like, yep. It wasn't the spot. It's that he finally realized that he could do that. He wasn't locked in this room. He had the power to choose to punch Don Juan in the face and get in his car and leave. And he always had that power. He always had it. And once you sit in that power, you have opened up a new store of energy. Let me say this in closing, and I don't know what I'm about to say. I'm going to pause it, but I need to wrap this up. I mean, it's almost 2 hours of me just saying the same thing. In the Art of Dreaming, with this amazing, very 80s cover, he says, our great misfortune is to have our consciousness so fully engaged that we don't have any time to pay attention. So this is the idea that like, I guess sometimes we feel that to have, an enlightening experience, we have to levitate and travel through like the 16 zones of spiritual awakening. But it's like, oh, yeah, we just need to pay attention. Solitary play, world building. It's a rehearsal. But for what? Dreaming. Dreaming is a second attention. Dreaming, think about this for a second. Your brain every night has, depending on how much you sleep, 5 to 9, whatever, hours to do anything it wants. It could just shut off. It could It could just think of a chicken on a rotisserie. That would be amazing dream. It could do anything it wants, and instead, it could shut off completely, and instead, it provides a moving picture of lucid engagement with alternate realities. And you, for most people, that's the only time you're present. That's the only time you're just present. You have to be asleep. Sleep is restorative to our body. It helps us to maintain physical homeostasis. That's of no question, right? We need to perform little apoptosis, get rid of the old junk cells. We need to heal wounds. We need to allow scarification. All these things, right? Your body needs just like, it's kind of absurd that we just like beached whales on a big uh, pillow all night. Just it's embarrassing, but fine. That's what sleep does for your body. Why is it good for your brain? Same reasons, right? Like your brain's just made out of nerves and dura mater, white matter, gray matter, whatever. But why is it good for the mind? It's because it's like meditation. It's the only time you're not distracted. Dreaming doesn't need to just happen in sleep. It is an act of unintentional and unavoidable imagination, and it is the best thing we can do for our mind, for our sanity. So, what if you did an act of intentional, optional, intentional imagination, where your perception is loosened from your environment, from your surroundings, from social consensus, and it's directed inward. There is never a more important time for this. Because remember, I said that the threat of AI was not like, Sarah Connor getting blown apart and just hoping John is able to figure out the right place to teleport himself to the past. It's that if you learn how AI works, if you learn how it sequences its sentences, the most disturbing thing is not that it's hallucinating, it's got a soul, it's becoming real. It's the real threat is that very often as it's deciding, and even that is like I'm using terms that aren't real. It's not deciding anything. As it's processing, it will have like multiple options in terms of like its choice on what information to present. And a lot of it is what? Just scraped from the internet, which is this huge storehouse of human knowledge. And, you know, even though we are a very conformist, congealed mind slog society, there are still difference of opinion. And say that you ask it about something, and let's not even be controversial. What's the best way to take care of an orchid, a Phalaenopsis orchid? It will scrape and it will get this much information that says that you do put one ice cube in it a day and leave it in partial sunlight. Water it until drenched and then wait till it dries. Put it out in the rain and fart on it. Whatever, like a very small amount here. It will choose this over and over and over again. And the more times it chooses that, the more search results are then generated for it. And that is more likely that it will choose that. And these alternative methods will get less and less and less likely to be chosen until they barely exist. The problem, the threat of this is not what it can do, but what we think it can do. And we are in the process right now of creating a reality of information where there is only one answer. You think it's bad having only two ways of thinking about something? Wait until there's only one. Or you can make a different world. You could try.